So good evening. Again, you are watching Mental Health Awareness. I'm your host, Timothy Wright, along with Quintera Wright, which is my cousin. Everybody know that by now. And my newfound friends, Michelle and Ebony. What a joy again to have you ladies with us again this week. Again, let's do our opening statements. We're going to start with you, Ebony.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ebony. As you guys know, I have been working in the social work field for over 10 years, and I'm very much enjoying doing this podcast. Any way we can help the community, and any way we can reach you guys. Again, if you have any questions, please send emails, chat if you want in the chat box, and we will definitely try to answer those questions. And like I said, I enjoy doing this.
All right. Hey, good having you again. Michelle Obama.
Hello, everyone. I am happy to be here again. I worked in mental health for over 20 years, and I look forward to continue answering questions and to build support for you all. Glad to be here tonight.
Hey, glad to have you as well. Cuzzo.
Hello. Well, of course, I absolutely love this mental health awareness podcast that we have been doing for the last several weeks. It has been amazing. And I'm so happy to hear some of the feedback, some of the interaction that has grew over the last several weeks. I just pray that this is a blessing to someone. We know that we are not, we don't know everything, but what we do know, we're able to share. And I love the fact that we all have different perspectives to give in different insights on different conversations and topics.
Hey, girl, glad to have you as well. This has been, and I shared this before. This has been therapeutic. This is two things has been a joy to me. I got a few friends that I actually hang out with. We hung out Friday night, and it was so therapeutic till it was ridiculous. And then my Monday morning, doing my exercise and stuff, and my Monday night joy is seeing you three faces. So, hey, and then again, I don't have to pay for it. So I'm so grateful for that. So, but thank you again for joining us. Those of you who are watching, if you are watching on Facebook, we want you to do this real quickly, like and share. Again, we talked about the fact it possibly could save someone's life. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Again, thank you for watching us. We've been dealing with trauma for the last 2-3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been, we've been trying to find other topics to talk about, but for some reason, because of what we're seeing, and again, some of the questions that were asked on last week brings us back to trauma. All right. So we need to jump straight into our Q&A. Let's do that. And the first question was this: if you was watching with your child or grandchild, how would you explain to them what happened? And the person is really going back to what happened in Texas with the elementary school, the shooting at the elementary school, where there are 19 children and 2 adults that died in that mass shooting. And I thought that was a great question. And then let's dive into that. I'm sure there's so many angles we can take this just one question. So again, if you was watching with your child or grandchild, how would you explain to them what happened? Who wants to start off?
So I guess I can go ahead. So when it comes to, of course, that was a traumatic event, that happened in Texas. There were several lives that were lost. A lot of people experienced the trauma directly, some indirectly, and it affected the entire school, the entire community, possibly the entire state. And so that's not an incident that we take lightly at all. And even just watching the incident unfold, learning about the incident, it created secondary trauma, for some of us who watched it just from TV, from the news, from articles that was put online. We all have experienced that trauma from that incident. We were all impacted. And so how you relay that information to your child really depends on the age and their cognitive ability. So what you may tell or educate a child who may be 5 or 6 may look different what you may tell a child that is 13 and 14 versus a child that is 18, 19. So I think it really depends on the age and cognitive level of what they can understand. But like we said on last week, children are very resilient. Their comeback is strong, and their recovery time is expedited, seems like sometimes, in comparison to adults, who's experienced trauma. I mean, who've experienced different things in their life, different circumstances, versus children who haven't been through those same type of traumas and experiences and different walks of life. So it looks different. But I think it's important that mass shootings will not go away. That's something that is inevitable. It will happen probably forever, and I think the most important thing is to create awareness about the situation of how to, hey, this happened, and it doesn't mean that it won't happen again, but let's prepare you if this does ever happen again and what that could look like, so it's very different on how you want to relay that information and give that information out. But I think if you create a environment where children know that, okay, this could happen, and I don't want you to be fearful that this could possibly happen again. Because if you lead a child to just being fearful, then they're going to always run away from their situations, always run away from their problems, instead of, hey, this could happen. I don't want to put you in fight, flight, or freeze. Let me help you process this information of what this could possibly look like, because this could happen if you walk in the grocery store, like in New York, or this could happen if you went to church,
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right, Quintero. And so also, I know we discussed this last week, and we said about, people that, adults that have some trauma, about meeting them where they are, because that's like a term we use in social service all the time. It's the same thing with this situation and with the kids. You meet them where they are, and you explain it to them in a level that they can understand. Because even though you might have a 12 or 13-year-old, like we said, they may cognitively function as a young, they may not be that mature. And you might say like they need to understand like a 5 or 6-year-old or a 7 or 8-year-old. You just meet them where they are, but when you are explaining it to them in a way that they can understand and that you're comfortable with, you also encourage them to, like she said, not be fearful. Encourage them to continue doing the things. This is a good opportunity to say, well, this is why it's important to listen to the adults. This is why it's important when you go to school to pay attention to when your teacher says don't do A, B, and C. So you can kind of make it a lesson as well, kind of like encourage that, so they're not just focused on the fearfulness of, when I go to school, this may happen to me, or mommy, I don't want to go outside because this may happen. This is a good time to reinforce these safety things that you want gone over with them when we're outside, or we're in a public place. Don't stray away too far from me. You know what I mean? Or if it's your teenager, this is why it's important to check in and call me and let me know where you are. So it's tough, but we can't shy away from it. We can't not tell them, because they're going to see it. And if we don't explain it to them and help them through it, then they're going to do it in their own way, or even worse, let someone else tell them something, and it can be terrible.
So Michelle, let me ask you this. So
Yes.
we have possibly a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, and they come to you with the fact that there's been a mass shooting. They have experienced this mass shooting. How do you handle that?
I would handle it. I would handle it like age appropriate, right? I would get on their level. I would kind of explain to them, as you talk to a 7-year-old, I want to sit there and say, oh, they experienced trauma, they're mentally ill. I would not explain it like that to a 7-year-old. I would actually say, I identify, is that a bad thing happened? He hurt people. It's like the Texas shooting, they hurt people. And that it wasn't a good thing. They shouldn't have, used guns. We need to communicate, you could talk things out if you're having issues. And I would explain that person, especially the shooting at the school, has some issues where, mental health issues, whatever issues, however you want to put it, that cause them to act the way they act, hurt people, which is no excuse. We have to talk and communicate. That's how I would explain it. And you can also use YouTube to kind of Google things, or Google to kind of find out how to best explain to a 7-year-old. But there's some things that I would do. Even watching it on the news, like we can watch news with the child and kind of explain after you watched it, after they said it, you can kind of talk about it, what y'all both just saw and ask the child, so what are your thoughts? What did you see? What do you think about that? And you start a dialogue and communicating. So what do you think about that person that did that? And then kind of go off that. Just see what the child understanding is. It may be more than what you think it is, or it could be less. So I would go from there.
Right.
So it's being age appropriate is important as well. Quintera.
No, I was just going to point out, what Michelle said. Sometimes we correlate when someone do something horrific as them being a bad person, so it doesn't necessarily mean because someone did something horrific or someone made a bad decision doesn't make them a bad person, because we all at one point or another have made bad choices and made bad decisions, but some have taking them a little further than others. But I guess with explaining that is explaining that, hey, it doesn't necessarily make this young guy a bad person. However, he did make a bad decision, because he could have chose to an alternative route to express his anger, his frustration, his fear, or whatever thoughts and emotions that he was feeling at that moment. And then to create an environment where your children feel safe and comfortable talking to you about everything. After that incident, I hope that all parents went home to talk to their children about what they are seeing in school, in public, what they're talking about online, everything. Create an environment and a space where children feel comfortable and safe talking to the parents. And a lot of times, children don't. So they talk to their friends online. They talk to their friends in school about how they're feeling and how they're being perceived. Because sometimes they don't feel safe or feel comfortable talking about different subjects and different topics because they feel that their parents won't agree with them or won't hear them out or however.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, it is good to always point out that, not everybody is bad. But, one thing we always say, crisis, regardless of what it is, it's an opportunity for growth, right?
Right.
So, in this particular incident, we can teach I have a 5-year-old, so if he was to ask me, mommy, why did he do that? Or why did they do that? I would explain to my 5-year-old, he was upset about some things and he didn't know how to talk to someone. So instead of talking, he acted out, and that was a bad thing to do. He shouldn't have acted like that. That's why if something is bothering you, that's why it's important to talk to me or talk to somebody. This is an opportunity to teach them to know that, okay, when I'm feeling upset, when I'm feeling anxious, or if I'm feeling angry,
right,
this is not the decision I should make. I should talk to someone, so it's, even though it's unfortunate, all crisis has an opportunity for growth.
Right. Now that's I like that. Because what we are witnessing is that the fact that every parent, now we would assume that every parent probably sat down to explain what happened that day. But is that really true?
I guarantee you, there are many families that didn't go home to talk about this conversation, didn't have this conversation. Sometimes, like when you think about socioeconomic differences, all of us have different lifestyles, and I often think about, inflation is happening, and imagine a single mom or a single father trying to provide for their children and sometimes having to work multiple jobs, 1, 2, maybe 3 jobs to provide for their family. So when they come home, they're exhausted, they're tired, they're not having conversations and checking in, and so it's not because they don't want to, it's because life happens, and so it looks very different, I think, for a lot of different people. And then you have some who are ignorant to the fact, and ignorance is basically a lack of understanding.
Absolutely.
And haven't really had a conversation with their children because intellectual development isn't there. Social awareness isn't there. And so sometimes that can be looked upon as you should do better, better, and sometimes it's not. So
go ahead, Michelle.
I totally agree with Q, but I was also thinking as Q was explaining it, sometimes Quintera, was explaining it. If we're not directly impacted by it, sometimes we ignore it, right? If it's not at my front door in my home, I wouldn't address it. Like I would not. I have conversations about things that happen with my children, just to have that dialogue, communicate. But a lot of people don't. They may have it with their friends or their colleagues at work because it came up. But talking to their children, that's a little different because it wasn't that it didn't happen at their school. They were not directly impacted. Right? It went at their grocery store, so they weren't directly impacted. So having a conversation with someone under 12, or when they may not have that. But I do agree with her.
So the most important thing is to develop a dialogue.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And a lot of times that's not what we're seeing. Let's be honest with ourselves, especially when we put stuff in a scale as far as economic is concerned, where there's some neighborhoods, and we have to be honest with ourselves. There are some neighborhoods where that's the expression. Hey, it's all good in my hood. Long as it's not happening in my hood, we don't have to talk about it. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, it can actually happen in your hood. So it is a conversation that we really need to have with our children. And Ebony said it so well that you create a dialogue and set it up in a sense that you can actually have a conversation with your child. Now, I think that's the most important thing. So we anything else on that question? Because this question is wow. It's mind blowing. Yeah. Because you looking at the fact that there are some children who might be 12, but there might not be on a 12-year age level, so you deal with that differently. That might be somebody 18 who can't understand on that level. So the whole situation is different. So we have to govern ourselves according to that child.
Right.
But the most important thing is try to develop a dialogue, something that they would understand.
Mm-hmm. And for parents who want to be intentional about incidents such as this, there are protective gear that you can get and put in your children's backpack. You can teach them emergency contacts, like, hey, this is who you call if you have an emergency. If something's going on at school, text this number, call this number. This is where you live. You have children who don't even know their own addresses, and those are some of the we look at those as little things, but those are some of the things that could protect you, that could save your life. If you could pick up the phone and call your mother, or pick up the phone and call your father, hey, I need you to get here, like ASAP, So just, I think intentionally putting different things in place for safety measures and safety precautions. We know there are a lot of things outside of our control. But for the things that we can control, I think we should be intentional with what we are doing.
Absolutely. I remember when my daughter's 16, but when she was 5 or 4, almost 5, I made sure she knew my phone number. And it was just something I just felt like was very important to me. Like, God forbid, she's on a school trip or she's out with family. If she wanders off, she can always say, this is my mom's phone number. So I'm trying to teach my son now, but he's a little active, so we'll get there.
Here's the thing, and we talk about that because I'm 50 years old. Cell phone, there was no such thing as a cell phone when I was coming up. Our phone was on the wall. We had the long cord, and we actually knew numbers. And now we're at a point now where we actually don't know. If I want to call Tara right now, I do not know her number, but I know her name. So we're looking at how technology has changed the game, and we don't see the importance of the fact that we need to know numbers and address and stuff like that, because it could save our life. So I think that's important as well. That we put our children in a position that, hey, here's a situation, and this is what you do. And we saw that in Texas with some of the children actually calling their parents, say, hey, there's somebody in our school and he has a gun, and a lot of parents ran to the scene. So that is important. So it seemed like we need to have conversations before conversations.
For sure. Proactive work is better than reactive work any given time, for sure, definitely.
And we would think this is a conversation we shouldn't have to have. But again, since the shooting in Texas, which is about 3 weeks ago, there have been 30 mass shootings not in the world, in the United States. So this is a conversation we really need to have. Hey, y'all, let's do this. We got to pause. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, like and share. We've been having great conversations about mental health awareness. If you are watching from YouTube or Facebook, like and share on Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Again, we're here with Tara, Ebony, and Michelle, mental health awareness. And y'all, we're here to help you. Let's go into this next question. That first question is power pack, y'all.
Yes.
So the next question is, how do you explain to a child why they have to go back to school when they witness what happened to their classmates? Now, I shared this before we answer that question. I think I shared this a couple of weeks with you guys. The fact that was and I think Michelle talks about the fact how kids have great coping skills, and this particular girl actually covered herself in blood.
Mm-hmm.
So the shooter would think she was dead, but when she got out, one of the parents was at the scene, and he thought she had got shot. And he tried to go to see what was wrong. She says, I'm good. She says, but they shot my best friend. And he says, who is your best friend? And the name she called was his daughter.
Mm.
And here's the reality. From seeing that, that's a good question to ask. A child might not even want to go back to school. So how do you address that? when they witness what happened to their classmates?
I mean, because he or she is directly impacted, that's going to take time and therapy. You know, that's going to definitely be some PTSD.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
For those who are directly impacted, it is going to take time. Again, continue to encourage them and encourage them to be fearless, not to, you know, have so much fear that it can happen again. But I wouldn't push, you need to go to school right now, because they were directly impacted, you know. But then you also have kids who witnessed it around the world and it's like, well, I don't want to go to school. You know what I mean? So again, you have to encourage them as well, because what we don't want to do is incite fear in every kid, you know, like, oh, if you go to school, this can happen. So we have to kind of, again, use this opportunity to encourage them and reinforce the things that we taught them as far as safety. Why it's important to listen to their teachers. Why it's important to stay together with their classmates. Why it's important, you know, to follow the rules in the school, in the classroom, because we need to avoid something like this. And that's for the kids who weren't impacted directly. Now, for those who were directly impacted, it's going to take a lot of therapy, a lot of therapy and time, you know.
Right. I definitely think that I definitely think that you have to be creative when it comes around education. I think I talk about Georgia all the time, but I think Georgia has done a really great job with their education, the Board of Education, and how the curriculums are developing. And I think it's really unique here because you have so many different types of school. You have online school, you have night school. You know, children have the option to attend night school. Like, that is amazing to me. You have pods. And so, like, I think that you have to kind of think outside of the box when it comes to education, because education doesn't look the same for everyone. And that's just how we say, like, everybody's not fit for college, everybody's not fit for trade school, everybody's not fit for the military. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you really have to look at it and really see what is most beneficial for your child as it relates to the trauma. You know, trauma affects us all differently. You know, and we can't just say, oh, get over it, you'll be okay. It doesn't just work like that. But I definitely would encourage families to, I think, look outside of the box when it comes to education and what type of supports that you can put in place. Because right now, what security looks like in school is metal detectors and a police officer. Is that enough? Like, you have to actually really look at the situation and say, like, is that enough? Is a resource officer and metal detectors, is that enough for a 30-to-1 classroom ratio?
Right.
You know, we know crises such as these are not planned. You know, and when someone catches you off guard and someone comes into the school with a gun, is that resource officer prepared? Is that teacher prepared? Are those children prepared? You know, so like we said, these incidents could happen anywhere. We're not expecting these to happen in an education setting, but I think thinking outside of the box of what your education curriculum looks like, I think, is important.
Now, let me ask this. You know, you talk about the Georgia school system, but then we have, let's look at Mississippi, and let's be honest with ourselves. Most of Mississippi is rural. So that child, honestly, that child has no choice than to go back to school. So how you deal with that?
Well,
because we got to get to a point. We got to get to a point where the children are at least they feel safe about going back into the building.
Right. I think that it really takes doing some research, on what options are available. What I have started to see a lot more lately is people developing virtual schools or creating small classroom settings like at a library or church, or at a neighbor's house, and then parents rotate being the teacher, or you have a mentor or you have a certified teacher coming into the library with a set of children. So I think it really takes, and I think there is funding to develop, it's almost like homeschooling, or there is funding available for that, but there are going to be some necessary steps that you have to take in order to get that funding. That a lot of times, because there are steps, people are like, oh, I'm not going to do it. It takes too much work, but I definitely think that check with the Board of Education, see what funding is available to create, because it may have to be where someone creates something that looks a little different, that looks really unique. Because with homeschooling, although there is a set curriculum, you can incorporate different things for stress management, like yoga. You could teach life skills in the classroom, how to prepare meals, how to what it looks like to transition out of high school, so I really think that really doing the research and looking to see what funding is available, and right now will be the time to do it, because it's summer, and the fall is not here yet. But right now will be the time to really look into, see what is available and out there. And I know Mississippi does look a lot different than Georgia, but I know that there is funding available, I think, for every single state for what education should look like. I know there are some programs that are available for children who have seriously been diagnosed with some mental health, like a diagnosis. There are some situations that you can get through your individualized education plan, or IEP, where you can do kind of what it should look like. And Michelle, Ebony, you guys know what PHP looks like, but maybe looking at a route for a partial, not partial hospitalization, homebound, but almost like a curriculum like that, where it is open classroom setting, it is smaller classroom, it is organized and developed in such a way where you're targeting not only just the curriculum of education, but you're working on mental health stuff as well. So I think that you really have to be creative when it comes to that piece of it.
And I think a lot of schools since the pandemic in the past couple of years have reshaped the curriculum. A lot of kids all the kids stayed at home,
Right.
Especially when the COVID numbers are high. So that shouldn't be a problem. Mississippi, Georgia, rural, what have you, everyone was at home. That's number one. Number two, you always can advocate for your child. If they cannot attend school, they can send coursework home, and there's things that can be done to assist them and support them through this stressful time. I'm sure that a lot of schools are reshaping again the curriculum, what that looks like. They did it for the pandemic, right? We know there's a rise with the new gun laws and all that stuff. It's a rise of shootings. Things are going to look different for every state as it relates to schools and education.
Right. Now let me say that. So if there are educators watching us tonight, please do inbox us and give us directions on, if you're watching from another state besides Georgia and Mississippi, let us know so we can clear that up as well, because we want to put information out that would be very helpful to you. So again, let's look at the fact that, again, there are rural areas. So if there's somebody that's watching tonight, your educator, administrator, email us, okay? Do that for us. Anybody else?
Michelle put it out there good, like that's in Quintera. I just want to say, there is some federal funding for homeschooling. It's not a lot, but there is some out there. You just, like she said, you just have to advocate. And there is that the No Child Left Behind. And that pretty much targets the school districts on how the kids learn. You have to meet them where they are and make sure that they're able to matriculate and get to the, and graduate from K through 12. So there are ways to go about it. I know some states have a lot of charter schools in place, where it's like a smaller setting. But there's definitely, like Michelle said, rural, whatever, it can be done.
Yeah. And that's tough. You know what I mean? So when a child experiences trauma, even in a classroom setting, we see it with our children, is they lack the ability to focus, and so when you're not able to focus, you can't complete your work. And it's really tough for children when they've experienced different traumas and have these stressors of worrying and fearful and being able to complete just simple classwork. I think that you definitely may have to work with like counselors and administrators on developing a 504 or IEP to help advocate for them if they need breaks. Like, hey, this child may need like a 15-minute break every hour. Like, they may need a preferred person to go to. That could be the coach, that could be the librarian, that could be whoever, when they're feeling stressed or feeling overwhelmed. So it may take putting some extra steps in place to help the child feel safe going back into the school and then talking to them about it.
Right. And it may look like they only come to the building once a week. You know what I mean? They have to slowly integrate back in. It doesn't have to be a 5-day school week. It might be an hour a week. Let's just see, you know what I mean? And then kind of gradually get back into the routine. There's so many things that can, so many ways that can look. Right.
And you don't necessarily, and I know a lot of times people think about IEPs, it's a legal document, your IEPs don't necessarily have to be like you have a IEP because you're academically struggling. That can be emotional disturbance as well. And by law, I go into like issues when it comes to that, but by law, that district is supposed to accommodate the needs of the child, even if it's emotional. So like Ebony said, if that means going into school once a week, and even with an IEP, they're even supposed to, if it doesn't necessarily meet the child's needs and you've exhausted all efforts, you can even send a teacher into the home. So I think knowing what the laws are and knowing what you can and cannot do is important. And I think a lot of times parents don't know what they have access to, so they can't advocate.
Right.
And I know when I was growing up, individual education plan, it was for the kids that had special needs.
Right.
And the special needs have to do with kids that suffer from different developmental disabilities, which that's not the case. As you stated, also for kids that suffer from depression, anxiety, and other issues that impacts their learning challenges or differences. But as parents, we are our child's biggest advocate. Right. Get a group of parents together, go to the board of education and advocate for change in your school system. That's your right. So your child must receive the best education possible. That's their right. And the best learning in their environment possible for them is power in numbers, is strength in numbers. I know in Georgia, we even put what we call cozy corners in the classroom. You can get up donated items like blankets, them fidget things. And like when the child has anxiety, they're able to go to the cozy corner where they can calm down. There are things that you can do to assist and support a healthy learning environment. And it's their right to learn. It's just they have different different learning challenges and differences. I don't want to say challenges, but differences
Different
in learning.
styles.
Yeah, different styles of learning. That child may struggle with emotional regulation. They may have severe tantrums, right? It depends on the age of the child. They may need time to go get, to calm down, or go get a soft blanket, or a good, we have where we give them, like, we spray the blanket with smell good to kind of calm them, tea tree or whatever, to kind of calm them, and they can hold the blanket and for 30 minutes, and then they go back to their group. So there's things that we can do to assist our children.
Mm-hmm. And this is the biggest thing, the kickback you always hear. Oh, we don't have the funding. Take it up the chain. I'll always tell you, take it up the chain, because there is funding. They was like, oh, we can't do that. We don't have enough staff. We don't have teachers. It's not my problem.
Right. That's not our problem. You have to hire them.
And like I said it before, donations. People would donate. Go to business in your community. Donate sensory toys. Get things donated. You don't have to, you can be creative. Like, you can do fundraising, and you can write grants. You can write grants to help support the school, because schools in poor area do suffer. They don't even have books. So Cozy Corner, they won't have that either. But again, you can take up donations. You can ask people outside of your community to assist.
And also too, you don't know a lot too, because it's always the zoning thing. I'm zoned for this school. If your school zone cannot accommodate what's on that IEP, they can move you to another zone that can accommodate you and provide and provide transportation for that child to and from. So these are some of the things a lot of people don't know, because let's be honest. Speaking in Georgia, I live in Clayton County, which is not one of the best school districts, but outside of Clayton County is Fayette County schools, and they're like the top 10. So if I have a child in Clayton County who has an IEP and Clayton County can't accommodate, guess where my child is going? They're going right to Fayette County. And guess what? They will provide transportation and everything else.
And it's through the McKinney Veto Act. So this is a federal law. So it hits all states. And a lot of times people don't know, right? Because they don't educate themselves on public policies, but there's so many resources that are out there that are available. And sometimes it's just learning about what the laws look like in your county, because they can look different from county to county and state to state. But knowing what the laws are in your county and advocating for that.
All right. So we're looking at the fact that we have to be creative in getting the child back into the classroom. And sometimes that doesn't look like when I was going to school 30 something years ago. So, but we got to be honest, because I've actually went in a setting before COVID, and the children were actually laying on on mats, and they were learning, and my mind was going like, that ain't how I remember this. I remember straight lines. You're in the desk, straight line. Don't say nothing. Children were having a blast, and they were learning. We just looking at this, how we got to get the children back in the classroom, but it don't have to be, as Ebony say, it don't have to be 5 days at the moment. So our hats off to administrators who have to come up with some hard decisions, because we're seeing more and more mass shootings, not just at a sporting event or other places, but we're actually seeing where our children become traumatized by what they see.
Right. And my hat goes out to educators,
yes.
To teachers and to administrators. I think it's one of the hardest jobs to have, because children spend every waking moment, at least 8 hours with them. Right. So they're not only just their educator, but sometimes they're their parents, they're their advocate, they advocates for them. They teach them, they're the nurse, they're the doctor, they're everything. They have so many different roles for just a short amount of time. And it's so overwhelming. So my hats go off to teachers. I think it's amazing to have someone who go above and beyond for someone else's child. You know, it's not their biological children, but as a paid professional, like to do what they do.
All right. Anybody else before we go into this next question? Look like we're gonna spend most of our segment on the questions. So here's the last question. I would tell you who sent the question, but that would blow her cover. So the question is, how do you encourage an 8-year-old or 9-year-old child when they accidentally break something or spill juice or something like that and cry out and feel they are always the one doing something wrong? You know, because most people think they're developing some mental challenge now, and that might not be so.
Just like you said, the word you say, encourage. You have to continue to encourage. There was a saying that my daughter used to say. What did she say? Everybody makes mistakes. That's why pencils have erasers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the best way to, I think, encourage is to model. We make mistakes. You know what I mean? Sometimes kids may feel like I have to be perfect because I'm expected to be perfect because my mom is perfect. No, you have to show them the side of you that's not perfect. You know, I do it all the time with my kids. Oh, I forgot to close the refrigerator. I forgot, you know what I mean? So just to show that accidents do happen, but we have to learn from them and move forward. It doesn't make you a bad person. Nothing is not that it's always your fault. These are things that happen in life, and we have to learn how to bounce back from it. It's kind of hard. I would kind of try to figure out why this 7 or 8-year-old is feeling like everything is their fault. You know what I mean? Because that's kind of a learned thing. That's not something that's a natural born reaction for children, because children are silly, they make mistakes, and it's just like, uh-oh, you know what I mean? So I would kind of dig into that too, and have that open dialogue to say, why do you think everything is your fault? You know, did someone ever tell you everything? You know, you got to ask the questions to see where it's stemming from, because sometimes we say things to children not realizing we're saying it out of frustration, and it's just a moment thing, but they're taking it literal, and they hold on to it, you know? So yeah, that's exactly how I would kind of do that.
I also think it's important to create positive reinforcement. You know, I always say, catch your children doing something good instead of when they're doing something wrong, you know? So when they are doing something wrong, it's not as bad. Also, you know, children look for reactions. You know, even when you have a baby who, you know, a toddler, they slip and fall, they fall face forward, they look at you first, you're like, oh my God, then they start crying. It's the reaction that you give that caused them to cry. It's not because they're hurt or they're injured, because they looked at you first and you were, you know, frustrated or afraid or tense or however. So you created an emotion that they looked at and they follow suit. So sometimes we create, like Ebony said, we create, you know, spaces, but I think creating positive reinforcement, you know, encouraging them when they're doing something more, when they're doing something right. Oh, you did an awesome job putting the dishes away. So when they are doing something positive, you know, they're recognizing it instead of recognizing the negatives. You know, like, oh, I did do something really well today, or I did do that. You know, and it encourages them to want to continue to look for those positive reinforcements instead of the negatives.
Michelle, did you have something?
I totally agree. I would, as you was talking about explaining, I thought about my grandson that is so afraid of ants. Like, he's never been bitten by an ant, nothing has happened, but he's so afraid of ants. So I asked his mom, like, what's going on? Why is he so afraid of ants and flies? Because her mother is scared of ants and flies. So she kind of transferred that to him. So now he just I explained to him, I said, hey, you're bigger than that ant and that fly. You need to hit it. You know, you need to hit it or step on it. So he's like, you know, he's not scared of it anymore. But our fears, we can transfer to our children, right? So we have to model for them. And that's another way you teach resilience. react, right? Not we always panicking and just overreacting when something happens, right? Because we're teaching our children how to be fearful. In some cases, this can happen.
And it also goes back to, like you said, Michelle, too, with us, we have to be mindful as parents and as caregivers, our reactions. Like when Sarah said, you know, when the kid falls and you're like, oh my God, now the whole world stopped. Where if it was like, okay, you know, they'll be fine. I think about that single parent that worked a 14-hour shift and came home, and, you know, my 5-year-old is up waiting for me and we're trying to get dinner and bath together, and they have their cup of juice and they spill the juice. And now I'm just like, oh my God, you know, now I'm acting out of frustration. So in that child's mind, it's like, I did something wrong again. I did something wrong again. You know, we have to, as the caregivers and adults, we have to be mindful of our reactions too. Because like they say, someone could compliment you all day. Well, I like your hair, Michelle. I like your hair. I like your shirt. I like this. And then one person could say one negative thing, and you remember that for the rest of the week. You don't remember anything else.
For the rest of your life, you remember what your 5th grade teacher said one day in class.
Yes.
All the positive, it don't matter. But with that 5th grade teacher, you 40 years old, still talk about what your 5th grade teacher said.
Right.
So positive reinforcement is good. And oftentimes we don't know how much influence we have on our children, good or bad.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Children pay attention to everything.
Yeah.
Even when you don't even know they're paying attention, they pay attention.
They are sponges.
Yes.
I work with a population now that don't speak English, but I'm telling you, they know exactly what we say. And I remind my staff, hey, they don't speak English, but they understand a little bit of something, because, you know, they'll report something back to the translator because they pay so much attention. They're quicker than we are. No, they weren't born in the United States, but they're quick with their learning. They're just sponges.
You know, being a parent and a caregiver is it's a hard job. I remember when I had my son, I was like, I kind of got a little anxiety. Like, I'm responsible for his life. So the decisions that I make and the things that I do and how I raise him at home can really determine how his outcome as an adult. It's a tough job. It really is. And that's why I say, even with parents and adults, we have to constantly educate ourselves. That's why it's so important for us to recognize our own traumas and our own things, so we don't pass that on to our children.
And what I teach parents are, there are no perfect parents.
No.
There was not a handbook, and there was a handbook. Every child is different.
Mm-hmm.
There's no perfect parent, but what the key is, be transparent, be honest. As an adult, when I mess up, oops, now I shouldn't have called you big head, but you just made me bad, right?
Right.
Those are not good words to say, and I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Because we're human, right? We're human. So be transparent. Look, that wasn't nice, and I'm not justifying it, but your head kind of hard. Big head came out at the time.
Yeah.
So you just gotta be transparent with your child. But there's no perfect parent. No,
not at all.
Yeah.
My child at 10 is, I'm still like one of my children is 27, but my parenting is just different at 27 and 20 compared to when it was 9 and 10. It's going to change, but it's
right. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Michelle, because a lot of times, even as parents, you know, we think we're always right because we're adults, you know, and sometimes parents have a hard time going back and saying, you know what, I was wrong. I apologize. I could have said that a little differently, you know, or I could have handled that situation a little differently. And sometimes children need to hear that.
I think it kind of goes back to how we were raised. You know what I mean? Because I remember as a child, my mother never apologized to me. And it was one of those things of, I say it, do as I say, not as I do. And when I say it is done, don't ask no questions. You know what I mean? So now I have a teenager who's like, well, I don't understand why you feel like this. Let's talk about this. I'm like, what happens to do? You know what I mean? But it is important to have that conversation. Like I said, and admit when you're wrong. I had to go back a few times and say, you know what? I handled that wrong, you know, and I apologize. Let's talk about it, you know. And but a lot of parents that came from a generation like Isaac, where I didn't have open dialogue with my mother. It was just do this, do that, and this is what I said, and that was it. You know what I mean? But yeah.
So we're seeing from the first question we asked until the question now, one thing that we can all agree on is that dialogue is important.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I stayed mostly with my grandparents, and Ebony, I can identify with what you said. It was their way of the highway.
That's right.
Now I was a little combative a little bit. I tried to talk back a little bit, but not too much. I knew my limits.
that didn't work. That didn't work in our house.
Goodness.
They would knock me into another family. I wake up at a Chinese table.
See, I was the baby, so I had my older siblings to kind of buffer and protect me, but I knew my limits too, because at some point my mother was like, "Listen."
Well, let's say this: dialogue is important, because let's be honest with ourselves. Sometimes our trauma comes from in-house, more than just at school or other places. Sometimes it's in-house. So we have to create positive reinforcement and always have dialogue. Look, y'all, that was 3 questions, and that's the whole segment. We wanted to share this though about the fact that our children are resilient.
Mm-hmm.
They bounce back faster than adults, but we still got to have dialogue.
Right.
Just because we think they are good, we need to ask them, are they okay?
Mm-hmm.
Do y'all agree with that?
I agree.
And I'm not the professional.
I agree. Children will tell you everything on their mind. Sometimes you're like, oh, what should I say? What should I do? I have to tiptoe around them. No.
And they come right out with it.
They will tell you like it is, and you have to prepare yourself, because you're like, okay, I wasn't ready for that.
They wasn't expecting that.
I had a client, he was 6 years old, and he taught the classroom, and he said, I just don't know how to manage. I just thought about it. I just had a rough day. I mean, they know, but we have to create a safe environment where they can tell us what's going on, and he's 6, he's just bright and very smart. And he just lets you know, I just had a rough day today. Like, my day was rough, and I didn't manage I didn't manage my madness. That's what he calls it. He said, I couldn't manage my madness today, and I'll do better tomorrow. He's 6 years old, but that's because he learned the language, right? At an early age. He's been having issues since he was like 2 or 3 years old. So he understood it's the madness in him, that the rage in him, right? He clears out the classroom. They had to take the whole classroom, everybody in the classroom, and they had to go to safety because he couldn't manage it. So kids, but his parents did a great job. They created a safe environment where he could recognize my madness has taken over my behavior right now. And he was able to communicate that once he calmed down. And so we just create that environment to help them, help our young ones deal with that.
Right. So this is where we are, especially with everything that we're seeing, especially mass shooting in our schools. Again, there was like 27, 28 mass shootings in schools this year alone. So this is definitely a conversation that we need to be having with our children, young and old.
Right. All ages.
Yeah. So look, y'all, our time is well spent. We thank you for yours. Michelle, do you have any last words?
No, I think I said enough. I think I said it all. So no, I'm good.
Okay. Ebony?
Pretty much, I think we did say everything. Just remember dialogue, and it's okay to ask questions. If you don't have the answer, just ask questions. And again, just thank you guys for listening, because that's a big part, just to be here to listen, so you can possibly share this information with someone else.
Right. And Tara?
I encourage you all to send questions. A lot of times people feel like they're so alone in that no one has experienced what they are experiencing. And so you'll be amazed. You'll be surprised that it could be the person right next door or the person right in your family who may experience some of the things that you're going through. So talk about it. Have a conversation. Don't feel embarrassed or feeling prideful. Like, I don't want anyone to know what's going on, but ask questions, because I often think about this boy who went into the school with the gun. That wasn't just something that happened overnight. That happened over a long period of time of rage and anger and feeling alone and all kinds of emotions. And so I just encourage someone to find just a trusted individual. You don't have to go to a therapist, but just find someone that you can talk to that will give their unbiased opinion about any and everything. And you feel safe and comfortable talking to them. So that's pretty much all that I have to share. Yeah.
Hey, ladies, thank you again. Hey, y'all been watching Mental Health Awareness again with me. I'm Timothy Wright, along with Tara, Michelle, and Ebony. It has been a joy, and I don't even have to sit on a couch. Thank y'all so much. Hey, enjoy the rest of your night. Sleep well. We'll see you next week.
Good night.
Good night.